So if you're watching this tier list, it means you want to know the best healer for Mythic Plus or Raid in 10.0.7. Today, we're going to do that. We're going to start with Mythic Plus, then do Raid. I have a tank one out as well, DPS ones to come over the next few days. But this is the healer video. So a little caveat first, every healer, every spec in the game can and will do all content up to plus 20s and way beyond that. So you shouldn't use this list as a way of inhibiting who joins your group. Player skill is much more important than spec choice. Remember that. But it's fun to rank them against each other, see which ones have, weaknesses, strengths, whatever. So with that out of the way, we'll get into it. Now, if you like the content, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Double check as well if you watch my content regularly that you're subscribed. YouTube is known to show you content, but you're not actually subscribed. So let's get into it. So we're going to start off by throwing Resto Shaman up in A tier. Now Resto has had a ton of tuning throughout 10.0 all the way to 10.0.7 and kind of brings it up into this A tier. It's very versatile and very, very strong in dungeons. It has lots of tools to handle whatever healing is thrown at it, so you'll never really have an issue with that healing damage. It also can do really good damage at the loss of healing globals, of course, and that healing, it's weird because it's sort of uncapped, but also sort of is capped. I could be wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that Acidic Rain does really, really good damage. But I think it's only capped to 5 targets. Could be wrong on that one. That doesn't really change the answer, though. It also has things like Chain Lightning and Stormkeeper. So very, very strong damage profile. However, it doesn't have that insane utility that the S tier specs do, which I'll get to whenever we get there. Its healing isn't the biggest. Its damage could be a bit more in uncapped scenarios, but a Resto Shaman will be a very valuable asset to your keys. It'll help you push the timer, help you heal everybody up to full health, and will never feel like a bad pick. Next up, Pvoker. Pvoker, S tier still. Despite the nerfs, which were heavier in Raid than they were in M+, Pvoker is still one of the best healers for Mythic Plus this season. They're durable, they have very good healing, especially to 5 targets. They have very strong uncapped damage through Fire Breath and Deep Breath. They also bring things like a Lust, they bring a Omni Dispel, they bring knockbacks, knockups. They bring a ton of good utility, tons of damage options, tons of utility options, and tons of healing. So really, Preservation Evoker is one of the better healers in the game and should be a very strong choice for your dungeon comps. Next up, we're going to do Holy. Now, Holy, I'm torn between A or B tier. And lower keys like plus 20s, plus 21s, Holy is definitely an A tier. But as you start pushing higher than that, Holy will see itself falling down to B. Holy's damage and healing is alright, it's perfectly fine. But outside of Apotheosis, they don't really have a lot of good ways of healing up parties, 5-mans, every time they need to. Apotheosis is only really a 2-minute cooldown. Outside of that Apotheosis cooldown, there's not a lot they can do. Sure, they have things like Divine Hymn, but I don't even think you take that or have it be as strong in dungeons. So while that healing is there, it's definitely not as good as some of the higher options. Now in a 20, this doesn't matter. In a 20 or things around that level, Holy Priest is great. But above that, it gets a little worse. Its damage is all right. It's mostly single target oriented damage, unless you're using like Holy Nova. Bringing PI is very strong, as well as, having Priest stamina buff. But Disc Priest is a better option for that than Holy is. So I'll put Holy down in B, just in general. But know that in the right hands, in a good player, Holy can and will perform very well. Holy Paladin is up next. Holy Paladin I'll put up in A tier. Has good damage, good survivability, good healing. Realistically, a lot of the healers are just very solid this tier. Holy Paladin's downsides come in A, it has mobility issues, of course, and B, it is a melee healer, which at times can get very, very hectic. You'll see I talk about this a little bit again with the Mistweaver monks. So Paladin with the tier rework is very strong. Sorry, the talent tree rework, very strong. Lots of healing cooldowns, lots of healing abilities. They bring Diva Aura or the new Ret Aura, depending on what your group needs. Probably bring the Diva Aura, but you never really know. They have strong damage with Hammer of Light, or whatever it's called, the zappy AoE hammer, Consecration. Single target things like Judgment. They have the Execute, Hammer Wrath. They have Holy Stroke. They have Divine Toll. So they have lots of damaging options, lots of healing options. Very strong spot and tank healing. A little bit weaker group healing, but Paladin, is a very strong pick for your dungeons. It doesn't bring that uncapped AoE or those incredibly strong healing cooldowns like S tier does, but you'll never feel like you're in a weak spot with a Holy Paladin. They're very, very strong and very, very good. Next up, Mistweaver. Mistweaver, we're going to put in A as well. Mistweaver suffers from a lot of the same issues as Holy Paladin. It's a melee-based healer. So in situations where you're forced out of melee, your mana and your healing will see a pretty sizable reduction. Because of that, it will slot down in A tier. Its damage isn't anything crazy. Fist weaving is a very good passive source of damage because you have to use those fast fist weaving options while you're healing. So you can kind of do both at the same time. Healing while dealing damage is a very powerful thing. But all in all, Mistweaver's issues do slot to it being a melee specialization. The changes in 10.0.5 and 10.0.7 with Veil of Mist, their artifact weapon, are very good, giving it more cooldown options. Crackbird is strong. They have like the AoE bubble application now, or that might be coming in 10.1. I'm not quite sure, but that's coming around the pipeline. That is very strong and very interesting, but they do lose out a bit when compared to the S tier specs. Speaking of S tier specs, Resto Druid belongs up here above Evoker. Now, Resto Druid is probably one of the better healers in the game now. With Evoker's healing nerf, Resto Druid pumps the most output in Mythic Plus. They do a ton of damage with the Swarm ability, the Necrolord ability, tons of passive dot damage, cat weaving, all that stuff. They bring a battle res, which is very important. Of note, Holy Paladin also brings this, so that's pretty good. They bring things like 3% verse buff, which is insanely strong in Mythic Plus. They bring knockups, knockbacks, a root. They bring Ursul's Vortex. They bring like damage and Nature's Vigil. So there's tons of options for a Resto Druid. They're very versatile, have very strong healing cooldowns. Their throughput is nearly unmatched, pretty much is unmatched in Mythic Plus, and their damage is very strong as well. Running out the last group here is going to be Disc Priest. Disc Priest slots in the A tier. Now, within A tier, they're kind of all amorphous to each other, like, not really ranking. S tier is the only one I put where it's Resto above Evoker. But down in A tier, Disc Priest is very strong. They do lots of damage while healing. They have lots of short cooldowns and short ramps with their Holy Word Radiance, putting the ability there, Atonement, on all of the party. They have Shadow Covenant every 30 seconds or so. So they have lots of little small ramps that are very good for them to ramp out that damage and do that healing every time the party needs it. They bring Priest Buff, they bring Mind Soothe, they bring things like Grip if that's ever needed, they bring PI. So they bring a lot of damage to the table and still have those good healing cooldowns. Bubble can be useful. Power Word Shield is actually very strong now, especially with whatever the Soulless thing is. The thing that lets them put out a bunch of shields at once and gets rid of the cooldown. The name's escaping me right now. But they're very strong in Mythic Plus. Probably the better healing spec to play for Priests. All those shields, all that healing, all that on-demand damage is very powerful. And if you have a Disc Priest, you won't feel like they're letting you down or anything like that. So realistically, healing balance for dungeons is very close. You can play any of these specs at most key levels. Maybe not the highest, like 27s or up. Even up to like 29s or whatever, but in the 20 to 25 range, all of these healers will do very well. They'll all perform exceptionally well and do what you need to finish the key. But as you push higher, you might see that the S tier ones start to outperform the A tier, and A tier start to outperform the B tier. So these are my thoughts for Mythic Plus, and now we'll move on to Raid. So finally, we come to the Raid portion of the tier list. Now in Raid, utility is very important. There are tons of class buffs that you need to have. If you don't have those from other sources, then these healers can be great ways of bringing those. Of course, I'm going to talk about other classes that are good in that, bracket where, like, let's say Priest brings a buff. Well, maybe Shadow's good, so that might knock Priest down, or Resto brings a buff. Maybe Boomy is really powerful, etc. But if you don't have those buffs, then these healers skyrocket up the list, and you kind of want to bring one, right? So, of course, everything is very deterministic of what your comp is compared to like what other comps are. I really am an advocate of bringing the player, not the class. Your best players will probably perform better no matter what class they're on. Giving the best, if the best player in your guild is on a survival hunter, for instance, bringing him over the worst player in your guild who happens to be a meta spec, probably a good idea, even though survival might not be seen as the best right now, for example. But with that out of the way, we'll get on to our rankings. We're going to start with Resto Druid. I'm putting Resto up in S tier. Resto has very strong passive damage with its dots and with Protector of the Pack, or whatever it's called, and Nature's Vigil. Now, if given the chance to do active damage, so using your GCDs to do damage instead of heal, Resto brings a lot of it. They bring Verse Buff, which is very, very powerful, and their 1.5 minute ramps around Flourish are exceedingly strong, some of the best in the game, and they can do them all while moving, which is very, very important. Lots of movement in this tier, especially on the last 2 fights. Resto pumps in HPS. It's not the highest HPS output healer right now, but it's very strong. It's very all around. Brings good damage, good healing, good utility. Brings an innervate if you need it for 50% on other characters. Although I don't think they take that talent, but that is there. They're very versatile, very flexible, and all in all, you really, really want one of these for your healing comp. They do a ton of throughput and a ton of different things that others can't do. Next up, Preservation. Preservation, I'm going to put an A. Preservation is probably the biggest loser of 10.0.7. They got really, really nerfed. I'm going to put them in A because of 2 reasons. One, fights like Razageth, you basically need 1 to 2 Evokers just to live wins in P1. So that is a good thing for them. They've basically designed Razageth to really highlight Evoker's utility. Also, Rewind and Dream Breath are incredibly strong cooldowns. Now, Dream Breath is very small, but Rewind is probably one of the strongest raid cooldowns in the game, just healing you for a ton of HPS over like whatever damage you took the last few seconds or minutes. So it's very, very powerful there. But their Lifebite ramps and their echoes and all that stuff is much worse now. I'm unsure if they're playing Blossom build at this current moment. I have an Evoker friend, he kind of hates it. I thought the general consensus is that Blossom build kind of sucks to play. And, you go really fast, whatever. They do really strong stack damage with Blossom build, but the issue is that you can't really be stacked on a lot of the harder fights, like Raz or Diurna, or even Dathia to a certain extent, but yes and no. Prevoker is very strong still, and because of their utility on Raz, I will put them up in A tier, but I could see them falling down to B because of how heavy-handed those nerfs were to them. I'm going to put Holy Priest up in A as well. Holy Priest got some interesting changes with things like the Naru and stuff like that, and they bring very strong raid-wide HPS throughput cooldowns. They just heal a lot. They bring PI, they bring Priest buff, they bring the ability to reduce the cooldown of all your other healers, all your personal defensives, which is very strong. And all in all, they just bring a really good, well-rounded profile that makes you want to bring one in your raid. Their damage is very good when they can do damage, but PI is also just a very good passive source of damage, which you definitely want to have. Now, they do have some weaknesses in terms of like movement and stuff, especially on Raz. But all in all, I do think they're very strong and deserve the A tier. I'm going to put Holy Paladin up in B tier. Holy Paladin's strength is tank healing. The issue with tank healing this time around is that tanks are very sturdy and don't really need a lot of babysitting like they have had in the past. Now, Holy is still bringing one of the strongest damage reduction cooldowns in the game in Devotion Aura, but with the strength of the other Paladin specs, you don't always need to bring a Holy Paladin to provide the base Devotion Aura. Now, of course, you want another Paladin for Retribution Aura or whatever it is now, so you do want 2 Paladins, and generally Holy Paladin is the best one to bring because of that Aura Mastery Devotion Aura. They do bring really good passive damage because they need to do damage while they're healing to reduce things, build up holy power, stuff like that. But the damage is okay. They're very slow as well. They are very durable though. Plate characters are just naturally really durable, but their niche in single target healing is just not really needed this tier. So we're going to throw them down in B tier. They are very powerful. You probably do want one for the cooldowns they have. But all in all, you just don't need a lot of single target healing this tier around. Mistweaver Monk put up in B tier. Mistweaver is very good with cooldowns. Revival and Breath of Yulon or Summon Yulon, whatever, are very, very powerful cooldowns. The biggest issue for them is their melee, like a Holy Paladin, which again is an issue, especially with how good melee are this tier. Lots of fights like Circles on Dathia just don't want you to have that many melee, or Wildfire on Diurna, for example. So they are strong. They do good passive damage. Probably the 3rd or 4th best passive damage. But the biggest issue is their mana. They will chunk through mana like Preservation Evoker does. And their healing profile, while they do have good cooldowns, is more kind of sustained, but it's less bursty, which again doesn't really fit too well with this fight. There's not a lot of rot damage this time around in the harder fights of this tier. The things that will kill you in the harder fights are going to be big, huge hits of damage, not really rot. So that doesn't really bode well for this kind of Mistweaver setup. So we're going to put them down in B tier. Next up is Disc. Disc I'm going to put in C. Disc just hasn't really been performing too well throughout 10.0, 10.0.5, and 10.0.7. And I don't really think they've received enough changes to fix that. They do really good really good damage, just passively with penance and all that stuff, as well as having PI, which is strong, and bringing Powered Fortitude, the priest buff. Shadow is very strong, though, so that does cannibalize it a bit. Same with Holy Priest Strength. The thing with their healing is that it's all ramps. And while I was saying that Mistweaver is bad because it's sustained, Disc ramps are, on theory, good, but you can't really have enough setup time to ramp into them. There's lots of movement required before those ramps, which is what makes Druid's ramps very powerful, because those ramps are done completely mobile while moving. So Disc is just kind of not really situated too well in all these fights. There's lots of spread stuff, so Barrier never really gets the best benefit. And all in all, their healing is just a little bit lower, and the throughput is just kind of worse than the rest of the specs. So it's going to fall down in C tier for now. Again, if you're a good Disc player, you can and probably will beat other people. But just in general, they're not the best situated of all the specs. And finally, we're going to go down to Resto Shaman, who I think is the biggest winner of this patch, bar none. They have incredibly strong cooldowns in Ascendance and their Totem. And they also have really good stacked healing with Healing Rain and Spirit Link Totem. Ascendance is very, very powerful, like Shaman. Shaman's buffs this tier, as well as the nerfs to Preservation Evoker, really do put them up into A tier. They had a talent tree rework, gives them more options, more power. Their tier set is decent enough too, and they're looking to be pretty strong moving into 10.0.7 and into the rest of the tier and beyond that. Resto Shaman, while they do the best stack healing, I guess it depends on Blossoms, but in general, they do some of the best stacked healing, and it's not really accessible to them. Chain Heal hits really, really hard. All their healing abilities are just really, really powerful, and they can do very good active damage when healing isn't required. Stormkeeper and things like Acid Rain if you need it, things like just throwing out Lava Bursts and stuff like that. So they're all around very strong. They're the highest throughput healing in the game right now, which is kind of crazy. So shout out to Resto Shaman. But all in all, their kind of immobility and the ability just kind of for everybody to be stacked, not be stacked right now, so they can't take use of their best abilities. It puts them down in A, but I do think Resto's very good and will be a class to watch moving into 10.1, especially with their new tier set. These are my raid rankings, and then my M+ rankings were before. So if you appreciate the content, let me know. That's going to be it today, though. So let me know in the comments like what you thought of me. Am I wrong? Am I right? Let me know just in general what healers you've been enjoying, stuff like that. Leave a like if you enjoyed it. Drop a sub if you really appreciated it or really enjoyed it. And I will see you guys next time. I have a tank video already out. I'll link that. And then I'll have DPS over the next few days. So I will catch you guys later. Have a good rest of your day. Peace. A big shout out to my YouTube channel members, Dimmy and Flapjack67. Your guys' support has really helped me make these videos as good as I can. If you're looking to support me and help me make more videos and better videos, then click the link in the description below to learn more about channel membership and get a ton of sweet perks while you help me make this channel as great as it can. Thank you.